to the ARC Hive Podcast, where we explore the arcs of our individual journeys and the strength of the hive that holds us together. I'm Amy Rost, and I believe life isn't meant to be navigated alone. Here we dive into conversations that bring us closer to ourselves, to each other, and to the communities that lift us up. This is a space for real stories, honest reflections, and meaningful connection. Whether you're in a season of transition, seeking deeper relationships, or simply craving conversations that inspire growth, this hive is for you. Because when we come together, we grow stronger. Welcome to the ARC Hive Podcast. Hello, everybody. So good to be back. This episode is, I think, a really important topic, and perhaps one that we don't talk about enough. We are going to talk about when your plate is full and making space for you. Because it is, in today's world, it is so easy to feel overwhelmed by everything that is on our plates. And let me tell you, you are not alone. In this episode, we are really going to dive into getting real about the constant balancing act many women face, from caregiving, family, business, to the never-ending to-do list, and how self-care often falls to the bottom or even off that list. This conversation is meant to be honest, but an invitation to pause and ask yourself, what do you really need, and how can you make space for it, even in a season that is full? So let's dive in, because this one is for sure a challenging one to unpack. Now, for me, I want to talk about the plate in specific. This was a tool that was given to me in a season of real busyness. As my son was being diagnosed with a rare degenerative neuromuscular disease, I was working, 40 to 50 hours a week, commuting, still had four kids at home. And I had given myself literally the gift of a retreat for myself. And I had gone to my favorite place in the world, which is Hawaii. And what I had done is literally built myself a solo retreat. I found a counselor who was willing to work with me sort of for the week I was there. And she brought out the image of the plate. And, often our plate can feel overpacked. It might even feel paper thin. And really, I'm hoping this episode is the invitation to you to pause, to reflect, to reconnect with what you need, because we can't pour from an empty cup. I know, we've heard that over and over and over, but it is so true. We have to fill our cups and take care of ourselves first. And you know what? You don't have to do it alone. So if you're busy managing busy schedules, meeting deadlines, caring for others, or somewhere in the mix you've forgotten to care about yourself, I always remember growing up in the time of Oprah when she had her talk show. And I remember actually as quite a young adult saying, I never want to be one of those women who one day looks in the mirror and doesn't know who they're looking at. And I can say I really got to that point in about 2014. I did not know who I was looking at in the mirror. And I felt, with that image of that plate going with me, that my plate was so overloaded, it could crack at any time because the weight was just too heavy. And as we dive into this, I want us to be very open and it not be about guilt or doing it better, but I want this episode to really be about giving yourself permission to create the space to breathe, to rest, and to just be, because I think we forget about that. So the weight of my full plate looked like, it wasn't just the everyday to-do tasks. The weight was also full of the invisible labor that many of us carry, such as the emotional, wellness of a family and kids and a marriage and yourself. The mental load, making sure everyone's mental health was good, including your own. And for me, it's the logistical a lot of the times. Got 4 kids. How am I going to get everyone to where they need to be on time at the right time? Sometimes that doesn't happen either. um, but it was looking at all those layers, and it was never just one. And I think, like, the to-do list, like groceries, all those things, laundry, homework, those things add up. Work, trying to carve out time. But then I think sometimes we forget about this sort of invisible load that we carry, about those mental, emotional, and logistical weights that I often say, like, I could have a plate, or sometimes I even refer to that plate as a backpack. And all of those things go into that backpack, and we're carrying those around as women all day, every day. And I think, we're living in a world where busyness is so glorified and it's almost expected. We hear, hustle harder, or, get a side hustle, all of these things. And what we're really starting to see, we're really in a generation of burnout. And it can creep in on you without even really knowing. And so let's talk about some signs of maybe we're running on empty. Even if you're still getting it all done. I know for me, when I'm really good with time, I'm really sort of um, an expert scheduler. I think that came in from having 4 kids and then my last 2 being twins. But for me, I started to feel like the walls were closing in. There wasn't a lot of space for rest. And I really was putting everybody's needs ahead of my own. And that really was not serving me well. And I'm going to be honest with you, this is a lesson that still creeps up for me today as we navigate just different phases or different seasons. And I have to remind myself, if I'm not taking care of me first, I am not going to be available to take care of anybody else. I also think women, moms, mamapreneurs, business owners, that if we don't take care of ourselves, there is no one else coming to take care of us. So we need to really pledge to ourselves, us first, and everybody else second. And that kind of goes against sort of what society has told us. I feel like we've been told to be the caretakers of everyone else, making everyone else a priority. And I know in times where I get caught, or I fall back a little bit into old patterns of this, those are the times where I become the most unhappy. Now, I'm also very realistic to say, there are times in our life where more of me is required for others than I can give myself. That happens. But I also I can recognize in the moment this is a season, and it will be short-lived, and then I will get back to self-care and getting myself back on track. And when I really went to this, like, self-made retreat for myself, it was really about, I was just exhausted and I was overwhelmed by not just the day-to-day stuff, but by the emotional self. And I really, 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 really struggled with, how do I get some peace amongst the chaos? And that was one of the greatest gifts that I could have given to myself. Was one, for me, sitting by an ocean is probably the most soothing thing for my soul. I especially, like, what I learned was when my son was diagnosed and we were able to travel, that when we went to Hawaii, I could sit at that beach. And oftentimes I was too tired to even read a book, but I could sit and I could watch the waves come in and the waves go out. And it was for me, that symbolism and that feeling was like the ocean was big enough to take these big feelings and these big um thoughts and circumstances, and it could take it out to sea. It was big enough. A lake didn't do it for me. Maybe if I was on the Great Lakes, but the lake did not do it for me. I needed that real motion of the ocean was what soothed. And for me, the signs of burnout are I can tell if I can't actually sit down and read a book, I'm overspent. I'm getting that burnout wall is coming closer every day. And I know then I've got to make some changes. And I think we also need to give ourselves permission to be fluid in those changes, because as we've gone through all these changes, as we've gone through, navigating rare disease and now kids starting to, launch and fly from the nest, I feel like I've needed different things. And I know that in the busyness, I don't have the answer to those things. I actually don't know. I don't know what I need. I don't know what'll make it better. I just know like the going is the thing that becomes my downfall. So let's be aware and be mindful of, is burnout creeping in, and what are the signs for you? I want to shift a little now and talk about the role of community in this wellness, in this well-being piece. And it goes back, I know I've said this many times, and I say this over and over. We are not meant to do it alone. We're not. We're not built like that. Humans are not meant to do it on our own. And I'm not saying you can't do it on your own, but I will say, from a woman who's recovering from doing it alone, is, we add an extra burden than we need to. And I think, looking at community, and this is the heart of this podcast, but community can be a tool, and it can be a tool in holding you accountable. And accountable not to your daily tasks, but accountable to the rest, to the rest, to the restoration, to the rejuvenation, and remind you that we are worth more than just how we are productive, how much we produce. We are more than that. And the rest piece always comes from my Pilates background as well. And it comes in from that place there, there are times in the movement practice where there is a prescribed rest. And I think as women, we need to ensure we have a prescribed rest. I always joke, I need a day between Sunday and Monday. And I said that to my kids the other day after a really full weekend of hockey and some caregiving and all the things. And, you know, someone asked, one of them said, what would you call it? And I said, I would call it my day. And it was my day to not schedule any activities. It was just a day for me to do the things that I wanted to do. And while I can't add an extra day into the week as much as I'd like to, then I have to think about how can I carve out maybe sections of time in my week to achieve that. So I thought that was really cute. They're like, what would you call it? I'm like, my day, just my day, no one else's day. And I think, looking at how can our hive in our community, such as it could be family, it could be friends, it could be um, studio members, it could be your network. How could they support us? And I want to share just maybe how those group of people have supported me when I couldn't support myself. And there have been times. So um, I am very conscious of who sort of gets into my inner circle. And it doesn't always mean like family is always necessarily in the inner circle. Sometimes they have to be a little further out, and different times require, different, there's just different needs. But it could, for me, being mindful of surrounding myself with women who can really support me where I'm at, and with no judgment, right? I'm not saying that they can't ask me, or say, hey, maybe this isn't, are you sure about that? Is that really how it was? Or is that really good for you? That's part of creating that network of who is asking you those tough questions, but who are also there really just to support you, as you navigate different things. And that can mean anything from like just a text message checking in to a quick, when can we chat this week? And what do you need? And I'm going to do a whole other solo episode on asking for help, because I think that's also something we all really struggle with. We're going to talk a little bit about it, but like really finding your people who can support you where you're at. And I can say, like, navigating um, motherhood and business, those people have changed over the years. And I think that's kind of it's a hard thing, but it's also a really beautiful thing, because I find, as getting older and moving into middle age, that those people who are coming into your life are coming into, and maybe they're coming for a reason and a season, but maybe they're coming in at a time where it aligns more closely to your values. And I feel like you can go really deep into to these relationships, because we kind of just, lose the filter of really caring what someone thinks. I want to see the messy, right? I can't relate to perfect. I need to see, like, we are all living a life, and anyone living a life, it's messy. It's messy. Parenting is messy. Aging is messy. All, like, running a business can be messy. And so I want to be in the weeds, as Brene Brown says, with those people who are messy. So calling in that support, the right support. And I really want to emphasize that, the right support. And if you don't have that community today, please reach out. Please send me a DM, because I am all about creating community that can help us all to thrive. Now, let's go back to this ask for help, because it is, I think, perhaps one of the hardest things to do, but I also think it's one of the most powerful things we can do. So let's just right now shift the thought of asking for help is a weakness. It is not. Let's shift that and replace it with asking for help is an act of strength. Asking for help can actually deepen your connections. It can actually bring you closer within a relationship, be it family, friends, colleagues, whatever the relationship. You're not weak in needing help. You are wise for seeking it. I want to say that again, because I really want this one to land. We're going to do a whole episode on this, but let's replace that thought that often it's a weakness. You are not weak in needing help. You are wise for seeking it. It goes back to, we're not meant to do it alone. And it goes back even further to our hive, where we're all working to a greater purpose. And when you win, I win. When I can help you, you help me. And it really is reciprocal. So, that's a big one for sure. So let's go back to our plate, and now let's talk about some ways to create a little more space. I want to talk about some simple strategies for reclaiming time and energy. So here's a few. One, how about a micro reset? How about a micro rest moment? All of us have the same 24 hours in a day. We get to decide how we use it. What if we just, every single day for the next week, put a 5-minute, carved out 5 minutes, put a timer on for 5 minutes, and we just were. You could breathe, you could journal, you could sketch, you could meditate. Whatever it is that brings you rest in that moment to reset, 5 minutes. We all have 5 minutes. I think the next one is really one that is super powerful. Non-negotiable self check-ins. Schedule yourself first. And I'm going to talk here to moms, and I'm going to talk to business owners. If you don't schedule yourself in first, someone else is going to take that time. If that time is in there and it's non-negotiable, it's yours. And no one else gets to touch it. And it's kind of the gift to yourself. And the non-negotiable self check-ins could be 10 minutes. They could be a weekly 30 minutes. It could look, you have the power to choose what feels right for you and what feels manageable. I'm not saying like put an hour in and think that that's going to work. That's probably not going to work right off the bat. I think the smaller the increment here, the bigger the change in result you're going to see. The next is boundary resets. Okay, take a breath. Boundaries. Look at boundaries are something we have with in every aspect of our life. And not everyone agrees with that, but we do have boundaries. We have boundaries in like, I'd like to eat a chocolate bar every day, but I can't do that every day and think I'm going to stay healthy. Might be pleasurable in a minute, but it will not be good in the long term. So there are things every day we decide what we have boundaries for. And I think about the boundary about learning maybe to say no for something that just doesn't feel manageable right now, or delegate it. And maybe think about saying no and delegating with love. How can I do that in the most gracious and generous way that doesn't hurt somebody's? It's not meant to hurt someone else's feelings. It's just, showing up and saying, I've got too much on my plate today. I just can't do this. Maybe you could do something else, or maybe you say, but maybe I could do this down the road, or could I find someone else to help you with that? Maybe that's the answer. So I think sometimes boundaries get scary, and they're really not. We have micro boundaries all day with ourselves and others. I also think the next one is creating rhythms, not routines. I don't really like the idea of balancing, and I think I've said that before. I actually prefer the feeling of harmony. Balancing feels like I'm tipping a scale, and that's not really my goal. Whereas harmony feels like, okay, we're trying to stay in this sort of level. There might be times where things, there's something has to take a little more and then it comes back. Like how do I build habits that are flexible, that serve you? How do you do that? And this, I think, is, again, it's going to go back to the first three we've talked about, is small steps. How can you make these little micro changes to start then trying it on and then say, hey, does that feel good? Is this working at the right time? Do I notice any change? That is where you start the rhythms. I really like to move more in a rhythm, rather than just like a strict routine. I had to have routines when I had babies. Teenagers, not so much. So there's a little more flexibility in there. And then see if that flexibility may open up more time for you. It's possible. It is. So my sort of go-to practice that helps me reconnect when I'm heavy, for me, it's movement. I'm lucky, I've got a Pilates studio in my basement. I love to just get on and move and breathe. I also love to get outside and walk in nature. I'm just outside Calgary, so we're very close to the Rocky Mountains. I love just a walk in the woods, smelling that mountain air and just resets my soul and helps me regenerate. And then if I'm lucky enough to get to an ocean a couple times a year, that sort of fills my cup and keeps me going. So I wanted you to think about, this is a little maybe journal prompt you can come back to later, or grab your journal. But what is one thing that you can let go of this week to make space for yourself? Yeah, what is one thing you could let go of this week to make space for yourself? And then I want a second question to this. If you had 15 minutes just for you today, what would you do with it? What would you do if you had 15 minutes to yourself today? What would you do with it? And think about what comes up. Just write on this. You can ponder this. But I encourage you to take one small action today to care for yourself. I really feel like, you know, the plate, there's certain things that can and can't come off my plate, but what are the things that I can let go of? There are things all of us can let go of on our plate if we look hard enough. Can we delegate? Can we just release? Can we say it no longer serves us? You decide. But again, the plate just divided into that 24 hours we all have in our day. We have to have sleep time. We have to have work time. What variables can you actually move the needle on, and what can you reduce? Because I think if we look at trying to take everything off the plate, I'll tell you, it won't be successful. The next, I invite you to actually share some of these reflections. Please use the hashtag ARC Hive Podcast and tag me, because I would love to hear, these simple action steps. One of mine also, a daily step, is I take a bath every night. It is my wind down time. It's my time where I get warm and I relax before going to bed. And that just sort of like lulls me out of a busyness of the day into relaxation and getting ready for bed. And then, I do really want to remind you that this podcast is a space for the real conversations. And I hope today's gave you the collective permission to rest, because I think so many times we underestimate the power of that rest. So thank you so much for being part of the ARC Hive Podcast today. I hope this episode has left you feeling inspired, connected, and reminded that you are never alone on this journey. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your takeaways and tag me on social media at arc.hive.podcast, and let's keep this hive buzzing. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and invite someone you care about to join us. And until next time, keep honoring your ARC, leaning into the hive, and showing up for yourself and your community, because together we are stronger. This is the ARC Hive Podcast. See you soon.